welcome to Slayerfest 98. I'm Ian Carlos Crawford.
I'm Kiersten White.
I'm Anthony Oliveira.
And I'm Mathew Rodriguez. And today we will be discussing Season 7, Episode 5, Selfless.
Yay. Hi, Mathew.
Hi.
She's back.
I'm back. I haven't been here since Joyce died. I hope nothing sad's happened.
The hardest thing in this world is to podcast about it.
I think towards the end of season 6, Anthony and Kiersten just heard me say the same things over and over again. I kept being like, well, I have nothing new to say. But we made it, and here we are. I don't know if you all... this is one of the episodes that I very much remember watching live. I can remember my reactions to it because I always loved Anya. So I remember being super excited that it was an Anya episode. And a lot of this, I remember the gasping and, the drama that was Baby J Ian watching this live. But I think this is a really stellar episode. I wanted to assemble our little Avengers. And Mathew, you said this is one of your favorite episodes, right?
Yeah, whenever I write my top 10 Buffy episodes, this always gets into it. And it's funny now, I was just saying to people before we record this podcast that I've been watching it with my roommate and seeing kind of the structure of season 7 and how early this comes in and how it really is the writers needing to wrap up the Anya stuff before the first really shows up. Is really interesting because it's also, I think it's very rare, especially in the Buffy world, to say episode 5 of any season is your favorite episode because things are always kind of revving up at that point. But it's just such a stellar hour of television.
Yeah, I actually have in my notes at one point, everything seems to move. I feel like I could have watched a 2-part episode of this, of more of Anya's backstory and more of because once we get to the living room scene, I was like, oh shit, the episode's kind of almost over, but I feel like it flew by. I felt like I could have paused on a bunch of these scenes and gotten more.
I like that it's a tight little puzzle box of an episode. It really is just a nice one and done character study. The stakes are incredibly low.
Yes.
In many ways, the monster is dead very early on. And in fact, it is a joke how quickly the monster is killed, which I always admire as a choice. But it's just a tidy little sketch of Anya as a character. And it really does tie up the character for the sort of the last push of her story arc, which is basically of her death, really. It sort of establishes she's her own person, separate from Xander, which is what her arc is going to be for the rest of the season. But it's also it's such an injection of fresh blood too. Drew Goddard really, it's his first episode. He really bursts onto the scene with this script. A lot of the themes of his career are here very early on. And also it just sort of summarizes her in such a perfect way. It's very fan servicey in the best of ways.
Yes.
I think it remembers all these details. Oh, remember that fight from 4 seasons ago? Remember this trinket that summons the Hoffren? It really shows off and pays off a lot for fans, which I really liked.
Yeah. And it's so well structured too.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, just the incredibly formalistically, right? Every scene has its own little thing. It's a biopsy of her character. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was so impressed with the cutscenes in this one. Nothing was lazy. Everything. There were so many really clever, really jarring cutscenes. It was just so well structured. It was so well done. And of course, Emma Caulfield is just knocks it out of the park. She's so good.
It feels like a TV version of a biopic. Because those cutscenes they feel very biopic-like to me. And when you're writing that and when you're watching one, you have to choose really well what moments in life you go back to for a character, right? And I feel those 3, well, really we saw 4 moments, but let's call the troll moment 1 moment, even though it's cut into 2 scenes. But so I feel that is a good moment. And then the Russia moment, and obviously the best one, Once More with Feeling moment. Those are just 3 really good moments for the character to return to.
And the formal play of it too, right? It's not just a flashback to her in whatever weird Scandinavian pastiche we're in, but like formally it's playing the game of like the old found footage that's like all scratched up and like badly translated. And then obviously like not just a flashback to just like her happy with Xander, but specifically a moment of musical, right? Like it's not, the scenes themselves are fun as little pieces.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, I was curious, I wasn't sure if actually one of the three of you has said this on the podcast before, but people have said they wish this was like, they had just killed Anya at the end of this episode and that was like her end, but I don't think I would have liked that as the end. I think I like it as like we're ending her character, but she's still like, we're ending her story, but she's still there. I don't know. I would be curious. I didn't know if one of you had said that before. I knew someone who was a regular had. What you all thought of that. Like a lot of people have said they wish that they just killed Anya at the end of this episode.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Yeah, first of all, I would never accuse anyone on this podcast of saying less Anya. But I think that's like short season HBO brain talk, people talking, because like this was basic cable, 22 episodes. The actors stuck around.
She has a contract.
She has a contract. Yeah. She's not getting killed off. No.
In the credits.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also I feel like I'm actually still mad at the ending of season 7 because Anya fought for her humanity harder than anyone on this show, right? She starts out as a demon and she becomes the most human of all of them. And I like that, you know, I would have hated for her to die in this episode because this episode pushes her to the bottom, right? It strips her of everything that she's wrapped around herself to try and give herself identity. And I like that she spends the rest of the season just kind of figuring it out. Like she's not a major player. She doesn't have another big like revelation episode, whatever. She's just trying to build back the pieces of herself independent of men and career. And I love that. I think it would have been a huge disservice to kill her in this episode and like incredibly bleak to say like, yes. You've always defined yourself by other people and now you're dead. Like, no.
Yeah. I feel like we have telegraphed right to the end of the episode, but but to me, like really one of the things I have said on this show is that I do like that Anya dies. I don't like the way she dies, but I do like that her story is about learning to be human. And within Buffy and Angel, one of the ways you learn to be human is learning how to die, right? Like knowing that it has an end, like the Shanshu idea from Angel, you live until you die. And I like the idea that she doesn't make it. But to me, the most important shot of this episode is Xander. At the very end, Xander goes one way and she goes another way by herself. And that to me means a lot. Like this episode is about how she has always just clung to whatever comes by. As Dawn tells us right at the beginning, the first line of the episode gives us the thesis, right? Just do what everyone else does. Yeah. And at the end, she has to decide to do something else, right? And that to me makes it cool. What I regret about season 7 is what I regret about a lot of season 7, which is there isn't actually much life left to live, right? Like I would have loved to see like Anya trying to date, you know, Anya trying to get a job that isn't tangled with the Scoobies. And unfortunately, the nature of what happens to Sunnydale in the season is there's nothing that isn't the Scoobies anymore.
And I think it's also just because Buffy, if you really look at it, like tends to follow this pattern, especially, past season 3 where like they do a season of character building, which was season 4, and then a season of plot, which was 5. And then they do season of character building with 6, and then 7 is just plot. Like there's really no time for it. By the time the first is there, like everyone's storylines get shunted to the side just to defeat the first. But I think I always agree when we have talked about this in the past, Anthony, that I think death is the way for Anya's story to end. It makes the most sense for her because it's the most human thing you can do. But I do think that Anya gets to the distinction. Not only is it the human thing to do, Joss has said several times, and everyone on our podcast has said several times, every relationship on this episode has to end badly. But no one gets a better story arc as a partner on this show than Anya. Like she is the partner that transcends being the relationship that just ends badly with a gunshot or something else, you know?
Right.
One of my jobs, I remember my editor, she had said that was her issue with Buffy was that the partners never got good stories. And I was like, no, but Anya does. Like Anya gets that was always my like because that was like her issue with Buffy, was that she felt a lot of the girlfriends were just girlfriends. And I think there's an argument to be made that Tara is more than that, because she is, but I can understand, Tara doesn't get a lot to do other than be Willow's girlfriend. But Anya, I feel like Anya, there's so much nuance and development too, like over the seasons of her character. And I mean, and she gets, one of the best episodes of season 7.
Which is what's audacious about this episode too, right? Is like, she's one of the coolest, most complicated characters, and the thesis of this episode is actually she's not anything, right? Like, she's cool and complicated because she can't figure out how to define herself, which is what I really like about, again, like we talked about the formalist elements, but like every scene is about like, look, she'll just do what this guy says. She'll just do what she's supposed to do here. She'll define herself by her aggressive, tanky communism, right? Like,
right. Well, I mean, I'm no longer the co-host of this podcast, but I do want to take what you were saying and bring it a little bit into the beginning of one of the things that happens early in the episode, and say that like her wanting to find herself and feel like she's really a part of something is what drives her going overboard and doing a vengeance that is too heavy for her, right? Because I think that's a really common impulse. Like,
she's peer pressured into murder.
Yeah, it's like, if you're in college and you want to hang out with people and they do shit, like you do it, you are tofu and you soak up whatever flavor they are, and you try to do what they do, but to the nth degree. And so she's like, okay, like, my vengeance family says that I'm not being hardcore enough, so I need to do something that's even what's the word I'm looking for? It tests and probably oh god, what is the word I'm looking for? It goes past her boundaries, her own boundaries. Like, she has set boundaries in her mind, and it kind of flies in the face of her own boundaries.
Speaking of the like, and then you mentioned how the thesis is right there in the beginning, and it's wild to me that this was the first time I realized that Buffy's kind of thesis in the episode is also right there in the beginning. She's when Xander is like, oh no, Anya's not really doing vengeance anymore, Buffy's like immediately very cold about it and is like, well, I hope you're right. And it feels very like, that makes sense that at the end when she's like, I'm the law, gotta kill her. Like, she's very cut and dry with Anya.
Yeah. This episode doesn't really like Buffy. I mean, it is season 7 Buffy, right? Like, it is Buffy at her hardest. And it is really, watching, I was struck today by like how critical it is and how it sets her up in the most jaundiced of lights, right? Like, it gives you that long scene. Really, it is the perfect scene of a Spike and Buffy reconciliation, right? Like, here is how you could have landed that plane, and it just wrenches it away and has her walk in and be as cold as possible. She like literally quotes Judge Dredd later with the "I am the law" thing, right? Like, she is not. It knows what it's doing to her. So it's a choice that's what she is this season, but it is a difficult one to make for your protagonist.
Yeah, and I do think there's something to be said about the fact that it is from Anya's point of, like, the episode is Anya's episode, and none of them have ever really been that kind to Anya, right? Like, I think of Kiersten, I can't remember if it was you or Anthony. One of you co-hosted the episode where they, like, at the end of season 6, when they go to the magic box, and like Anya is clearly like beaten up or whatever. She was like, that spell was put on her to freeze her. And Buffy's immediately just like, well, are you going to help or what? There's no like, oh, this is our friend and she was hurt by Willow. They're just immediately like, well, are you going to help us or not? Because you're a vengeance demon. And that's kind of how I feel like Buffy kind of has always viewed Anya as more of like an annoyance. Yeah. I feel like weirdly, same time, same place was a better closure of Willow and Anya are kind of friends now. More, and like it made them better friends than Buffy and Anya ever were.
Well, she really is the antagonist of this episode, right? Like, she really is. She's the Javert, right? Like, she is the law who has come to say there is no room for gray. Like, when the camera turns to find her in the frat house at the end, like, she really is the bad guy, right? Like, she's come to kill the episode's hero, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, SMG, she commits to that, because she has like, there's no snark. She just has a blank, like, she has a look on her face that's like not normal Buffy fighting a demon, having a battle with like quips and stuff.
And it never finds a way to reconcile them by the end of the episode, right? Like, they part on bad terms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas
Well,
this
and that's
episode, I feel like, does a lot of rehabilitation for Xander, because Xander finally is very clearly saying, I did wrong. Everything that is wrong with our relationship was my fault. Because there was a lot of time in season 6 where he was very angry toward Anya for
Mhm.
dumping him after he left her at the altar. Yeah,
Right.
but I love it when he says he's getting a sad vibe versus a vengeance vibe. He finally, like, well and truly knows he's in the wrong and he's hurt Anya, and that's on him. And it also does a lot of rehabilitation for Willow as well. Like we saw in Same Time, Same Place, Willow finally
Yeah.
connects with Anya because she always felt competitive with Anya. She never liked Anya. And in this episode, we really see, because of what Willow's been through, she's finally able to be like, okay, no, this was awful, but I cannot commit to
Right.
or condone an action that says this is unforgivable, because if we say this is unforgivable, how have you forgiven me?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the point I was going to make, which I feel like we have never said, none of us have ever said on this podcast, was Xander is right throughout this episode.
Yeah. In this episode, Xander's right.
He is
It's
absolutely
it's a nice new suit for him to wear for one.
Yes.
Like, that was what I noticed when him and Buffy are talking. I was like, holy shit, Xander's right. And I know he's going to be right again when they have that talk. And like, that's wild that I'm thinking I'm siding with Xander over Buffy for like the first time in the only time in the whole series. Like,
It does the excellent, like, oh, it's a strange card to have held this long, but it finally pays off the angel thing.
Yeah.
Especially to have Buffy. And it paves over it, right? Yeah. The
Right.
pleasure of that. But like, I love the way it's like, oh, you want to yell at me about being black and white. Remember when you did this to me.
Right.
Like, that's the important part of that moment, even though Buffy doesn't realize that's what she's pointed out, right? Because then it has the blip of it and then swallows it back up.
Yes.
Before we get to that scene, I will have a lot to say.
Yes.
We'll try to go in order from here. We'll try. So we get our first flashback, which is Anya as Odd with Olaf.
Mhm.
One of my weird complaints here is we get a lot of, and I know that this is totally on purpose, is we learn that Anya's kind of always been like an outcast and always like not quite gotten, quote unquote, gotten it, right? But like, why does she have so many bunnies? We never reconcile. It's just like, look, there's bunnies here. She is terrified of bunnies, but look, there are a lot of bunnies. Like, I was like, I would have liked a little bit of like it. I don't know, something like, it feels like there was like something missing from like the joke of there being a bajillion bunnies in their house and the joke of like, oh, Anya's terrified of bunnies.
Oh,
Well, they're terrified of her because they remind her of a time when she was human and when she was the most vulnerable she's ever been and hurt the most she's ever been. And bunnies represent that.
Yeah.
Like, she wasn't even a capitalist.
it's when she was a
She
kind
wanted to give
socialist,
bunnies
right?
something. Yes, right? Yes, and
That's true.
gender
They do make a point
goodwill.
of saying that. Yeah. All right.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, I love that they went all in. They did that goofy, like, sort of sepia toned. These were funny. Like, the wigs were terrible deliberately. I love the lines like, she's like you're like a Baltic woman from a slightly more arid region. Like, it was funny. And I think that's something that Buffy always does so well, is you have these episodes that are such gut punches and they're so emotional, but they're also just so funny.
Yeah.
One thing I like about this scene is that each of the flashbacks honestly is really in a different is in a different film genre when you really think about it. So this one being almost like, very proto film. They show the the grains on the film and everything, and that's nothing they've ever done in an episode before for a flashback. And I like it here because I think it also underscores how much older than everyone, including Spike and Angel, that Anya really is. Like, Anya, like, when we're talking about Anya, we're talking about someone who's, who has lived so much more life than Angel and Spike, and yet doesn't have that jaded broodingness that they have just because they lived 100 years. Like, hello, she's 900, 1200, like, but I love that choice for that. And then each one I'll kind of, as we get to it, talk about the different film techniques that it does. But I think it really works well for Anya's flashback here. And I do like the bunnies. And I also, Yeah, so actually that's my last note. I do like the boundaries. I agree with Kiersten about like the subconscious reminders of humanity, the subconscious reminders of the dregs of humanity that are haunting her at night.
So in the DVD commentary, Drew Goddard said that the scenes were written in Swedish, but he intended, because they were going for that like silly old film vibe, he intended for the lines to be dubbed badly in English. So Emma Caulfield and the guy that plays Olaf were told they did not need to memorize the Swedish that carefully. So they memorized the Swedish phonetically, and that's why it sounds so weird the way they're talking. And then they just liked it for the vibe of the flashback and kept it and didn't dub over it, which I thought was, yeah.
That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah. And he said that they chose Odd for Anya's original name because while researching Viking names, he found a Viking king named Olaf who had a wife named Odd who was known for a sense of humor and her ability to manage money. So he just named her Odd.
Oh, I just assumed it was an odd pun.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it, because it's a little bit too much of a pun, but I don't know.
Knowing
that
there's
was
another
interesting.
piece there actually makes me like it more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then we cut to the Buffy and Spike scene, which we already talked about.
Which is so sad. It's such a sad scene.
Yeah. I can remember when I watched this thinking,
I do.
oh, I'm glad she's like being nicer to him. And then it was the fake out. Go ahead. Sorry, Kiersten.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say one of my notes is even mentally broken Spike keeps up with a perfect bleach job. So like, I really admire his commitment to an aesthetic.
He does.
Not a hint of roots on that damaged
I
head.
loved the rootsy
Yes.
look from the first episode. I'm sad that they cut it so fast. I liked him looking so different. This
Have
is
you heard him talk about
the
how his
first
scalp
thing
would
that I really
bleed?
like. Oh, really? I don't know anything about hair dyeing.
God. Yeah, that would probably be really painful.
Yeah, he said in interviews that like the bleach was so aggressive, his scalp would bleed. Poor guy. But you know, got to get that aesthetic.
Yeah, man.
Do it for the gram.
Do it for the gram.
But I can remember when I first watched it that I was like, oh, I'm so glad she's being nice to him. And then the like fake out, which I actually think is really good.
Yeah, it
the
was
scene,
great.
The scene feels weirdly placed though, right? Because it feels like I guess they just needed Spike, right? It was like, well, we've got James Marsden in the credits. We got to use him in this episode. He's hot, sure.
Yeah. So they shoehorned in Spike and they shoehorned in Dawn for their like 2 lines so that they could, contractually obligated.
It does show, like, again, Buffy enters the scene as the villain, right? Like, the camera pans over and it's like, oh no, it's Buffy. And it's like, I like that. And I really like the first here. Like, this is how the first should have been. Like, she touches him, right? Like, that's I really like the moment where she touches him, and then when we look at him again, he's touching himself. Like, I really thought that was a cool way. Like, I hate the whole, like, oh, if you hug it, you'll go right through him. Like, I like the idea of it as a phantom, and this really worked for me.
Yeah, so then we move to Willow walking on campus with her professor.
who cares so much? I mean, we're going to do everything possible to catch you up, Willow. Like, okay, sure.
Yeah. I don't think
Go ahead, Matt. I don't think Drew Goddard, when he wrote this episode, knew how college worked. Like, like I'm just like, this has
pop quizzes.
And like talks about like her grades slipping. I was like, your grades really don't slip. You have like a few papers. Like, it's really not. It's really not. And then like, you don't have to go talk to one professor that you had last semester. Like, it's a really odd scene.
It also, the ending of it, this is really weird, but like, it really, we've talked before about the whole like Buffy goes to college thing. When Anya comes out and is like, my boyfriend lives here, I was like, you are a grown woman. And it's like, no, she's supposed to be of college
like
age. But it's so preposterous that I was taken aback by it.
I know, because they age them up so much, but like realistically, they're like 21, 22 in the the characters would be. I mean, Mathew, we had talked about that before. Even like,
and watching it now as a 31-year-old, I was like, Anya, how dare you? What kind of call me by your name shit is this?
It is a great scene though, with the walk of shame and we just had lots and lots of sex, and Willow, you could see how hard Willow is trying, which makes you so sad because you know what Willow's about to discover. So you see Willow really trying. She's trying with Anya, right? She wants to extend that hand of friendship. She wants to make up for the ways that they've really shut Anya out. And then,
she goes to investigate, and because she saw the blood on Anya's hand because Lady Macbeth didn't wash it all off, and Willow goes in to investigate and finds all of these murdered frat boys with their hearts ripped out, and also, which is such a weird callback, she finds a girl in the closet who is a girl who was in Buffy's classroom in Life Serial.
Oh.
I don't know if we all knew this. Yeah. Huh. That actress is in 2 episodes. She plays the know-it-all student in Life Serial and another college student here, but I'm assuming it's the same person.
She is in more episodes of Buffy than Amy Adams, which is a problem.
Amy Adams would have killed this scene.
Yeah.
Yes. Cousin Beth in the closet.
I need to point out Willow's outfit here because it is so ridiculous, but I kind of love it. Like all red.
Yeah, no, I have specific notes on her outfit. And the boots. Boots like that break my heart because I'm 4'11".
So then Willow turns around to find the spider thingy crawling up the wall. We get Willow protects her and the girl from the spider demon, throws it out the window, and then she yells at the girl. What does she say? Like, stop your sniveling or whining or whatever. I feel like we didn't need that.
I have so many notes about those 4 seconds of show. Because, first of all, I hate that the girl in the closet says that a spider did it because she makes it sound like Buzz from Home Alone's tarantula was loose. No, it is clearly a demon. It is not a spider. And second of all, I think that they really do play a little fast and loose, like Charmed looks like a codex compared to Buffy with magic in season 7 because they really don't know what they're talking about, and the way that they make Willow go so bad just from putting up a force field. I get what they're trying to telegraph, but it feels so silly to keep. It just feels so silly and unneeded and unnecessary, and I really feel like they needed to write a magic Bible for Buffy behind the scenes, and they forgot that.
I was just going to say, I just wish it was clearer. Once again, I keep complaining about this, but I just wish it was clearer what happened to Willow. Was she in grief and she did this thing? Was she an addict and not under her control? Or now this third option, which is that the concept of evil made her do it, right? I'm not, I just wish the coin would stop spinning, you know?
Oh, I was going to say, there's a reason why when I wrote a book in the Buffyverse, I deliberately said it after an event in the comics that ends magic on Earth, because I did not want to deal with the lack of a coherent magic system in Buffy. I feel like you can get away with it to a certain extent in the TV show, but on a book, everything's on the page, right? You can see everything. And so I was like, I'm not going to deal with their lack of a magic system. But I agree. I feel it's very... it's tapping into magic inherently evil because it seems to just flip that switch so fast because she's not being particularly aggressive. She's not doing it for personal gain. Right. She's doing it to protect someone else. So yeah, I agree. There's not a clear line to why that would trigger that.
Let's just all thank our lucky stars we're not doing the Get It Done episode where she says that all magic is based on physics out of nowhere.
Hey, hands up! I do like that episode, but
I like that episode except when the writer said, you know what? All magic is based on the periodic table.
I my notes. I just I don't think she's protecting someone. It doesn't make sense that I get that it was supposed to be in season 6 it was very she's abusing it, but that's not abusing it to protect. I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the rules are just not there. So then we get back to is this a set? Yeah, we cut to Odd/Anya. She's cursed Olaf. See, the village is turned against him because he's a big troll now. And I think that De Hoffren, the actor that plays him, Andy Umberger, is so good.
Yeah.
With acting while in these ridiculous prosthetics. And his scene here with Anya is so good. It's I have so good for so many of the scenes because they're all so good in this episode.
Well, they clearly figured out the thing that the X-Men comics finally figured out with Mr. Sinister, which is it works if you play him as like an older gay man, right? Like if he's just kind of catty and kind of bitchy and like I really like the because there was always this like, why is it all these girls? And like, oh, because he's a gay and he likes there's like the Charlie is Angels kind of vibe about it, which I really like. His like appreciation for it is really like it's a great character. Nothing quite feels like him.
Yes.
Oh, I just love how this scene switches from that sort of like old timey, and then all of a sudden it switches to reality when he shows up because she's lost that, that happiness, that sort of like dreamy life can be okay. And now she's in reality and here's a demon and she's so calm when she turns around and there's a demon right there. I mean, I guess she did just turn a man into a troll. So like her reality is okay. But he's so great though.
Well, it's so funny. I was going to bring that up as another kind of film trope because there's so many films. And actually, it's funny because the episode of WandaVision with Emma Caulfield also goes from black and white to color. Yeah. So that's two Emma Caulfield black and white to color episodes we're talking about. But that is another film trope. And I kind of got the opposite sense. Like I kind of felt like the color came into odd Anyanka's life through De Hoffren. Like that is where she felt like that was a time, this is all about Anya the outcast and she's bouncing around from place to place. And he actually says to her, his words are, we're a family of sorts. He doesn't say this is a job. He says we're a family. And that's when the color comes in. And I like that sense that this is when Anya was awakened to not who she really is, obviously, but, she felt elevated in some way. She felt like she had become a part of something. Now, obviously, that family isn't going to be enough for her.
The Manson family, too. Right. It's not a good vibe.
It's a really interesting moment for the color to come in.
Okay, wait. I have a question that I was going to hold off until the end, but I feel like this is a good point to mention it. So a thing that like bothers me a little bit that I wish we had explained, like even a throwaway line is, in Angel, they did a little bit better of a job with like there being gray areas with demons. In Buffy, it was usually pretty black and white. And I mean, Buffy's very black and white in this episode about, no, we have to kill Anya. So do vengeance demons not lose their souls, or do they still have their, like, what's the deal with souls and vengeance demons? Because prior to this, it was always they don't have a soul. But like,
well,
right?
I do think that Buffy says specifically in this episode that when Xander says I still love her, she says this is not the Anya you love, this is a demon. So I think they are saying she doesn't have a soul because she's saying like this, it's almost with the vampire thing, like later on when they say, in Buffy they say you're not looking at your friend, you're looking at the demon that killed him. Right. So she says outwardly like this isn't Anya, that the person that you love, this is a demon.
But the whole point is like she hasn't been killing because she feels bad about it, right?
Yeah, I don't buy. As usual, I don't buy Buffy's. I've talked about this.
That's the problem. I'm telling you what their logic is, but it's insane troll logic,
right?
Because it's the same kind of logic with Spike. Like the logic with Spike was if you muzzle a dog long enough, it becomes a nice dog, basically,
right?
And like I guess the thing is like if you become human long enough, even when you lose your soul, the humanness remains. Like, but it makes no sense because when she was odd, she was human for like 20 or 18 years, let's say, and then she was just human for 3, and it sticks with her this time.
Right. Yeah.
Also, she agrees to kill these people as a human, right? Like it would weaken the story if she was like somehow metaphysically and ethically different as a demon, right? Like it only works as a character study if she is the same person through those centuries. I've gone on endlessly on the show about how I don't buy Buffy's whole soul versus not soul thing. The question to me always has to be is, are they using lethal force in a way that can't be stopped by regular means? And that seems to be actually what's happening here too, right? Like Anya is now killing people. Anya must be stopped, right? It's not like she entered some new state by being a vengeance demon. I think that the story is weaker if that's how we read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, yeah, I don't know. It's weird because it's weird that they spend so much time talking about souls with other characters, but then they're just like, I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, I think it doesn't come up specifically ever in this episode because of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, yeah, I mean, that's just a thing that I wanted to see what y'all felt. But yeah, that was just a thing that like kind of bothered me. But so Willow saves the girl. Willow calls Buffy. We see Buffy bored at work balancing the pencil holder on her head.
A rare moment of likability from Buffy in this episode.
Yes. And I like that she's like, oh, heart ripped out? Did you get the class you wanted? Like, that's a very Buffy, like.
She's got those great, like, cheesy motivational posters on her wall.
We also, Willow doesn't tell Buffy that it was Anya, right? She doesn't tell her that. We get Halfrek. We cut to Halfrek and Anya in Anya's apartment. And Anthony, I kept thinking of how, so Anthony and I had interviewed Kali Rocha early last year. Jesus Christ. It was almost a year ago, Anthony.
Oh my God, it was. But she was already in quarantine when we did it.
Yeah.
So
it would have been,
God, what a year.
So she informed us that she was flown out for a weekend because she was in a play in New York. God, I'm going to butcher this. I want to say it's Noises Off. Is that a Broadway show?
I do not know.
Well, I think that's what it was called. She was in a show, so they flew her out for one weekend to film all of her scenes for season 7, which is only this episode and lessons. And I kept thinking of what part of this was she not there for, because she teleports out, and her and Willow are never in frame together,
right,
in this scene.
Yeah,
I don't know if you noticed that.
She told us she was green screen for the final scene, right? Like she's never in the frat house, really.
Yeah,
which you can tell.
Yeah, which is fine. Tell. Like it's totally. She's really excellent though in this, and as always. Also, I really love that board that's above Anya's couch. I've always been obsessed with it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
I didn't even notice that.
Really? Oh, it's gorgeous. And it's like such a great little character piece, right? Like, because it has this like gothic energy, like gothic, like church style gothic. Like it tells you something about Anya's like fussy aesthetic in a way I really like.
One thing I want to say is that the set of Anya's apartment is a set that I wish that we visited more, because she has a cute little apartment and Xander's apartment was ugly.
Oh, I like that apartment.
Honestly, I would have just been. They should have had it where Anya was just like, "Why don't you move in with me? Because I have cute stuff and you have no style."
Yeah. Xander's apartment is very like investment banker's first apartment, where it's like, I guess there's a poster of this and there's the square furniture. Yeah, she has a gorgeous, fussy, like teacup aesthetic that I really like.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I like Kali Rocha's delivery of lemon drop when Willow comes in. It's like so good.
Oh my God, it's perfect.
Right?
Because really there is no reason that she would call Willow Lemon Drop. Like, I feel like if it were Dawn, she would call Dawn Lemon Drop, you know? But there's really no interaction between Willow and Halfrek for her to call her Lemon Drop.
I like Kali Rocha because she always plays Halfrek like a second grade teacher. Like there's something.
Yes.
Or, you know, I was also going to say, I feel like she always plays Halfrek as the Judy Greer to Anya's lead lady.
Right.
Yeah.
She has a very Judy Greer energy.
Well, and I mean, she told us when we interviewed her, remember, Anthony, didn't she say something like she always tries to go like left when people want her to go right? Like she does that on purpose. And I actually took her calling Willow Lemon Drop almost the way I saw someone retweeted something on Twitter today, actually, that was like, oh, when you're consoling a child, when you're petting a dog, when two bros are about to fight. And it's like, do you want me to get your mommy? Is like things like you say to a child you're consoling, and like a bro says to another guy trying to fight. I almost feel like it's like that version of that, where it's like she would say it lovingly to Dawn, but to Willow, she means it to be condescendingly like, you fucking dick.
She just oozes contempt in like the most syrupy, sweet way. Like she has a line in a previous episode where Anya's like, well, why aren't all my friends saying something? She's like, sweetie, they are. Like, why aren't all my friends here? And she's like, there's like, she just, everything is so saccharine. Everything is too much. And it's what it reminds us that we like her just so that we can, when we'll feel bad when
sad.
she dies at the end, right? Like it's really
Yes.
great work.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, remember when she read the mayor lines like off the cuff right away?
I just wanted her to play the mayor when I heard her do that.
When she read the mayor part of the first for our episode on lessons, she did that after our interview, and like it was so good, and she did it like right away. She was like, "Okay, where are the lines? Yeah, okay, got it," and like read them, and it was perfect, right, Anthony?
Such a pro! Oh my god.
But also another like reason we should have known Halfrek was going to die, because Anya literally says to her how happy she is Halfrek's there. She doesn't know what she'd do without Halfrek, and I was like, "All right, this is like sign number one. Halfrek's about to die."
Yep.
But so, and I do really like this Willow Anya scene. I think it's they're bringing more nuance to what's going on than Buffy does at the end, and I really like these two characters who have done, you know, evil things, but also like are part of the Scooby Gang. And I just like the idea of the two of them. Like Willow is trying to go there to kind of like curtail whatever's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really like that Willow has that respect for her, where she kind of knows Buffy's going to be black and white about it, right? That's why she doesn't tell Buffy at first, why she doesn't go to Buffy at first. But then like she kind of doesn't get anywhere with Anya.
I like the feeling of a scene of someone who has been down a certain path trying to speak to someone who she sees not going down that. I mean, they're obviously different, but they're both, let's just say, in the realm of evil. And I like that idea of, you know, there's many times in a TV show where two characters who they haven't really interacted one-on-one that much since like Triangle. And now Willow feels like she's the best to speak to her because of her own dalliance with evil. I like that as a character choice. You know, like before I tell Buffy to go stab you, I'm going to give you the benefit of a pep talk.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is the nice payoff of the DeHoffrin scene with Willow too, right? Like the reminder that he has made this offer to her before. Her work is in very much parallel with his work, right? Like it's a really neat, the fact that she can even summon him because he has made that offer before. Like there's a really cool path crossing thing happening with the two characters.
And I think that Willow scene with DeHoffrin, or the Willow plot device with DeHoffrin, pays off because you get the sense that even when she knows that Buffy is going on her way to go kill her, Willow is like, there's still a way for me to intervene. Like, if I can't get to her, one of her boss / best friend, one of her best friends who also is very into killing, will somehow get to her.
Yeah. So then we cut to Xander and Buffy hunting the demon. One of you already mentioned, I love that, like, it kind of throws Buffy off, but then once she throws it off her, Xander's like, "Oh my god, we got to do this," and she's like, and just throws the axe up. The demon's done. Like, we don't spend a lot of time with it. We don't need a lot of time.
Yeah, it was great. It was also the scene where my 7-year-old repeatedly kept coming into the room and wanting to watch what I was watching.
Is that too scary for a 7-year-old? I have no sense of.
Well, so here's the thing. So his question was, why does she have the axe and he has the sword? Because I think he should have the axe and she should have the sword. And I explained that she's the Slayer, so she can use any weapon she wants. And then when she throws the axe up and the spider drops down dead, he said, "Oh, I wish that she hadn't killed that spider. It seemed nice." So that's my kid.
That feels like a parody of like a story that, like, if I needed to tell someone about Kiersten's family dynamic, that's like a
girls can use whatever weapon they want. That's perfect. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I just one thing I do like about, and this is obviously said very early on in the season by the master that we're going back to the beginning, but the very beginning of season 7, before we get to the first stuff, does feel a lot like season 2, where like the gang goes out and tries to find out about the monster. And I feel like this Buffy Xander scene is actually something that hasn't happened in a long time on the show, where Buffy and Xander go out together to like do reconnaissance. And it's a refreshing scene in a lot of ways, because it is going back to the nuts and bolts of what makes you want to watch Buffy. And then also, we'll talk about this again, because I think that the scene of the conversation is a season 2 or 3 scene that hasn't happened in like 4 years on the show.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know that season 7 can be polarizing, but I think especially the start of season 7 does a really good job of showing us like scenes that remind us of like older episodes, like when in Help, when Willow's doing the research, just looking up Cassie, and they're just kind of like bantering, and that reminds me of that. And like, I don't know, I like that kind of stuff. Just like them kind of like the low stakes of like, you know, okay, what are like, I mean, clearly them hunting a demon that murdered people is not low stakes, but you know what I mean? It's not world ending stakes that we often get on Buffy or like anything like that. And it feels like a little bit more comforting that it's like, okay, and Buffy killed the demon. Like, we're good.
Right.
We can get all plot from here on out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so then after that, we cut to, a weird thing that I noticed. Xander and Buffy are like immediately bloodied up, which is like weird because the show doesn't normally do that, and the thing barely touched them. But like Buffy has these like huge deep cuts on her back and on her shoulder, and Xander has one across his face, which is like weird. I don't know.
I felt like it was just an indication that the spider demon had sunk into them in some way with its arms, or whatever, limbs,
to like make it more like to up the stakes of the demon could have done harm.
I mean, there are no stakes after this, and it does a good job of hiding that, right? Like, Anya is not imminently about to do something, right? Like, there is actually no active threat for the rest of the episode. And I think that maybe that's a good way of tricking the eye into thinking there is, right? Like, she's not about to grant another wish or anything when Buffy goes for her, right? Like, that's that's a cold-blooded attempt to murder her at that scene.
I mean, it's also very funny that that Buffy feels like she has to kill Anya because, you're right, Anya is not, you know, resurrecting a church from atop a hill to kill the world. Like, Anya is very maudlin and could do with a good pep. And like, if her friend brought them back into their fold, like, that is actually what could help, is kindness. But like, she's not in primo evil mode. She's actually really doubting her return to evil at this moment.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then we cut to the scene of, then they get home and they see Willow sitting in the living room. She's about to tell them about Anya. We cut to Anya and Halfrek at the Russian Revolution, which I think is such a good scene. I love Anya's line of, Russia was ready to explode. All we did was give it a little push. Like, so good. I love the whole scene. I love the man running in on fire and then barely noticing. I put, quote, "You're talking about work times I'm talking about life equals vengeance is what I am," which like I liked the conversation that, you know, we spent other parts of this season with Halfrek being the one like, you gotta do more, and Anya like, do I? And now like we see that in the past it was kind of reversed, right? Halfrek's the one that's like, well, we did this, let's go like chill and watch this house burn down. And Anya's like, no, we got to do more vengeance because that's all we're here for. And the two of them are so good together.
And at the same time, I also feel like it's very true to the character because, as I was talking about, like when you're first, you know, looking for a friend group in college or something, like, and you go really into something, like that becomes Anya's whole identity. And so she is saying it as a positive, but we're also supposed to, on some level, take it as a negative. Like, she has no identity outside of her work. And that is a really not, like, if someone told me that their identity was only truck driver, I'd be like, let's talk about this. Like, you know, other things for you to feel like flourishing and fulfilled. And I want you to be more than just truck driver, Larry. You know, like, so it's and it reminds me honestly of a line that Caleb says to the first Buffy later, where he first realizes that the first is in Buffy's form, and she asks him, you know, what do you see? And he says, loneliness or strength, and the loneliness that comes with real strength. And it kind of reminds me of that because when Anya is talking about like vengeance being exactly who she is, or being all of who she is, being her whole being, it sounds lonely to only do vengeance.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
maybe this is obvious to say, like incredibly obvious to say, but I do like the way, like we talked about how rigorously formalized the episode is. Like every scene has Anya change politics and self-identity.
Mm-hmm.
So like she's a socialist with the bunnies. She's now like this rabid, violent communist. She is obviously a capitalist in the present day, but also there's always the statement of like in the Scandinavian scenes, like you'll always be my beautiful girl, and now vengeance is what I am, and then I'll be Mrs. Right. Like we see like it's not just like vague. There's a very specific identity in each scene that she has defined herself by that is going to be undone by the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I wanted to read all of you these notes that I found that I'm not quite sure what they're getting at, but it says, so this is from the Buffy Wikipedia. In the flashback to 1905, Halfrek credits the Russian Revolution to Anya, an event which actually happened. However, in The Wish, Giles states that destroying her power center will reverse all her wishes she granted. There was an abortive revolution in 1905, which, though ultimately unsuccessful at toppling the Tsar, did force some needed reforms in a new constitution. The Russian Revolution, which brought the communists into power, didn't happen until 1917. Someone wants to translate that all for me.
That's
the reality is that Buffy just got the dates wrong on the Russian Rev.
Okay, so that's what they're saying, is that the dates are just kind of wrong, but that's probably just...
I think this person's trying to five-head it and like galaxy brain it and say that maybe Anya did cause the Russian Revolution 12 years early, but then her power center being destroyed made it happen 12 years later or something.
Yeah, no, I don't believe that. Yeah. So then we get to one of the very big scenes that we kind of already discussed of Willow, Xander, and Buffy in the Summers living room. This conversation feels like it's a long time coming. I can't believe how right Xander is. And this shit hurts my feelings. Like I remember how I felt when I first watched this, when Buffy says, like, do you remember you saying kick his ass? And Willow's like, I didn't say that. Like, I like this fight. I like this argument. The three of them are like doing some of their best acting. I read that Sarah Michelle Gellar was only available on set for 3 days this week because she got married to Freddie Prinze the week they filmed this.
What a rough episode to film while you're getting married.
So I feel like she probably walked in and was like, we're doing this in one take, and she fucking committed, because she gives, even though she's in the wrong, I think she's doing a really good, like the acting is really good here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so what I was saying before is that this scene is really reminiscent of all of those library scenes where the whole group would kind of confront Buffy about this issue. And those scenes were really good. And I'm going to go on a small tangent because I watched a YouTube video the other day that was about the one scene that really makes Avengers work and the scene that doesn't make Justice League work, and how they're the same scene. And Joss Whedon always writes that one scene where it's like they all come together and have this discussion about their ethics and their politics and what they believe and how it really works in Avengers, and it doesn't work in Justice League. And it's usually halfway through the movie, and they're both exactly halfway through the movie. And this scene reminds me of that video talking about Justice League and Avengers, because this is like all of the interested parties, aside from Anya, coming together and talking about their ethics and their politics and their agendas, and having to kind of come to a consensus that they don't come to about what to do with Anya. But I also like that, in a way, this is different from the library scenes, because Xander is not really on the offensive this time. It's usually Xander in those scenes who was the harshest with Buffy, and he would kind of be attacking her. And it feels like it's kind of reversed, where they have to finally have a talk about Xander's partner who kills people. You know, and that's where Xander's in the right, because all those times that they tried to convince Buffy that they had to do something about their partner, she wouldn't listen. And now Xander's not listening, and she kind of can't see why.
Right. Yeah. And like, I wish we had paused more on this moment, because I felt like, I mean, like you said, Anthony, they really do. They like show it to you and then they roll right over it. And I wish we could have had more of this fight, because the three of them are doing great acting in this scene. And I do really like that Willow's kind of just like, she's there, but she doesn't really want to get involved because, like just one of you said, it's like, well, where does that leave her? If we can't forgive Anya, why do we forgive her? And, you know, like the only thing Willow does is like, she's like, I didn't say that about Angel. And then also when she tells Buffy, like, I can't, like, she can't go to help Buffy kill Anya. And like, she's like morally opposed to this, but also like understands the nuance here. And I don't know. That makes sense for all three of them at this point in their lives and characters, that this is how each of them feels. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I see. It makes me really angry because it's such a sliding scale, right? Like, she's not the Anya that you know. She's a demon. Yeah, so are a lot of their friends. Like, they hang out with demons. And like later on in this season, we find out that Spike has been killing people and burying them in a basement. And like, okay, so he has a body count now again. But that's okay. And for whatever reason, Anya now having a body count when, you know, you have Xander in the previous season summoning a demon for kicks and giggles that gets like actual people killed. Yeah. Like all of these things, but it's not okay when Anya does it. And that really bothers me that Buffy draws such a hard line here. The other thing that drives me nuts, and we talked about this earlier, is that they almost go there with the Angel reveal, right? That the kick his ass. I never said that. Like, why can't we go there? But I think it's because it would complicate Xander and Buffy's relationship so much at this point, and I don't feel like they had the space to address that. But it really bothers me that they didn't, right? Because we waited so many seasons and we thought, oh, that's never going to be addressed. Right. And so for it to be briefly addressed in such like a throwaway, Buffy doesn't even notice way is like, oh, come on.
You know, and what's weird is until this viewing of the episode, I kind of had remembered it as, I didn't remember Buffy saying both of you, but she does explicitly say like Willow too, because I always thought it was like Buffy throwing in his face, like, oh, remember the lie you told me that Willow didn't say this.
But she doesn't know that it's a lie.
Yeah, she doesn't know that it's a lie because she even while she's arguing with Xander, she turns to Willow and says like Willow said it too, as if like that is what happened, when we, the viewers, know that's not. And but I do think you're right, Kiersten. It probably would have complicated their relationship like way too much for like all the other plot they needed to get through. And like, where would we have fit that in as well? It would have had to be like, she forgives him immediately and we just keep moving with this argument. And that wouldn't have worked either.
Yeah.
Now I'm just like thinking about what Kiersten just said. And like, I mean, there's things that are hard to pinpoint with this season, right? Like, it is actually kind of hard to tell how much they could rely on Nicholas Brendan, for example. Like, could he have been allowed to carry a plot this season? But Kiersten makes me wonder, like, it would have been cool if what came to head in season 7 was Xander's militarism, both as like an actual character beat, but also like his black and white way of looking at the world. Like, what if Buffy were convinced by that and it had to be something that was addressed by this season instead of something that seems to manifest almost entirely out of her character as like an expression of her, like, a Slayer is always alone philosophy. Like, what if Xander were proposing this sort of increased militarism that will now dominate season 7 and anything that was made during the period of the Iraq War, right? Like, what if that had been something she had chosen to reject instead of it just being like a manifestation of like the feminist ethos that swallows the back end of the season, you know? Like, that would have been cool to see. But again, like, can Xander be relied upon to carry that big a plot at the end of this is a question.
I'm surprised. I think what you're pointing out, though, is that there in this argument, Xander is being inconsistent with his philosophy of now 7 years and how he people.
As you said, it's the first time he's asked for mercy ever, right?
Yeah, and no one seems willing to say like, oh, it's pretty like. He tries to throw things in Buffy's face, and it's interesting in writing argument that no one says, well, you always want to hack away at whatever, problem we're having. And now all of a sudden, when I thought I would be joining your side with like getting rid of evil, you have a problem with it.
Right. Like, he wanted to murder Spike just because he had sex with Anya. Like,
and Angel and Oz, right? Like, Xander spends his days hanging out with people he has advocated for the murder of, right? Like, it's a little odd. And it comes, I guess, off the end of season 6 where he had to be Mercy guy, right? Like he's Yellow Crayon guy. So now it's kind of, he's in a different mode now. But like, what is Xander's arc this season is also an open question.
Well, I would just answer that by saying that almost no one gets a real arc this season because they just focus on the plot so much.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Dawn gets the most arc, and it kind of ends by potential.
True.
Well, I will say, funnily enough, just because I rewatched this whole season recently.
Did you finish the whole watch?
I finished the watch 2 days ago.
Oh.
Funnily enough, it doesn't end with potential. Later on, it becomes very clear, and I forget where this goes in the comics, which I won't open that can. But it becomes clear that like Dawn is going to be a Watcher or something, because she says mini Watcher a couple times, and she ends up spending most of the end of season 7 hanging out with Giles, who actively hates her sister.
At that point,
I mean, as soon as she was trying to figure out how to pronounce Mafashnik, I was like, she's going to be a Watcher. Like that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the thesis of Dawn, right? Like those who can slay, those who can't watch.
So Buffy storms out of the house with her sword. Willow immediately runs upstairs, gets her talisman to summon D'Hoffryn. And again, D'Hoffryn is so good in this scene. Like, I love that it's like, he's doing his like demon intro voice, and then he's like, "Oh, Mrs. Rosenberg, so good to see you again." Like he clearly likes her and clearly knows her power, and like that's Anthony. Like you said, it's like he's like a gay who's like, "Ooh, another woman with powers."
Yeah, he loves
great.
a diva. He loves drama. I also like the weird glimpse into what Arash Mahar is like his strange note about the sketch on Lloyd's cubicle wall. It's like, what is his dimension like is very unclear.
Well, it's very interesting.
I also love that you remember the name of his dimension. Like, wow.
Anthony, I can't believe you pulled that out. I was like, what?
I only remember because in her terrible Latin, Willow says Arash Maharis, and I was like, oh, they made it, they like put it in its declension or whatever.
And often says Arash Mahar in his speech when he's turning around.
Oh, there you go. See, not that remarkable.
But I think what interests me most, and this is going to jump ahead in the narrative just to kind of make the point, is like,
I'm gonna press my buzzer.
Yeah, you were, I didn't press a buzzer when you were doing it at minute 1. But so D'Hoffryn, it's funny because D'Hoffryn is like this in a way when he talks about the water cooler and everything. It's unclear to me, or the show is unclear on how he treats his vengeance demons, because he does refer to them as a family. And then he's very cavalier about losing 2 of his family. And it feels very cold and capitalist at the end when he basically, you don't know how big the roster is. I think earlier Anthony referred to them as kind of like Charlie's Angels. Well, what happens if you lose 2 out of the 3 angels in one fell swoop, right? So it's kind of a question of like how D'Hoffryn calls them a family, but then he's so cavalier about getting rid of 2 of them, and then spends the rest of the season trying to kill Anya, because every few episodes there's a demon that comes after Anya that they do actually have to kill.
Which I do think that part they shouldn't have done. I think they should have just like, fine, we don't need to hear from D'Hoffryn again. Like this should have been the ending of D'Hoffryn, because I do think it feels weird that like he made a big deal about how he wanted to cause her pain. He even references the fact that he knows she's going to die, but then still sends the demons. Seems like,
it does feel like an odd beat. I think it diminishes the magisterial exit he goes on here.
But also to Anthony's point, isn't it a point also about the misogyny of gay men, that when women don't act the exact way that we want them to?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, they're dolls, right? Like there is sort of the disposability is part of that, right? Like I talked about the Manson family earlier. Like there is kind of like, there is something seductive about the way he gets her, and then he wants to have her. Like they're favorites in a very objectified way. And they're interesting only insofar as the art they make interests him, right?
I would love to see Once Upon a Time in Arash Mahar as a film.
See, Kiersten, I'd be curious what you think about this, because I always kind of viewed D'Hoffryn as like a charming mob boss, where like he's still very cutting, like, you want to leave, well, I'm gonna fuck you up so much, even though I've been nice to you, even though prior you were my favorite, the idea of you wanting to leave, now I'm gonna ruin everything you love. And that's kind of how I don't know, how do you like see him?
I mean, yeah, like because he puts on such like he wants to be relatable, right? Like he makes a joke about a cubicle and the water cooler, and like he's going to relate to people on their own level to try and get them to feel like, oh, we're friends. He's not just my boss, he's a friend. But then again, as soon as you stop serving his purposes, he turns so cold and just absolutely vindictive. And, like we've all had friendships like that, right? Where you're really close to the person and you do a ton of stuff together. And then when the friendship's over, they're like, oh, by the way, I'm going to burn you to the ground. So, I mean, yeah, like I think he's such a fascinating character, and they do such a good job with him because, yeah, he comes across so like playful and so funny and relatively charming. And then he destroys Anya in a way that nobody else could, right? Because he knows how to take absolutely everything away from her.
Well, he's the foil for Xander, right? And Olaf, right? Like, he is another, like, all the things we're talking about, like the misogyny and the objection of the person once they're done with them. That's exactly what Xander did, right? Like, suddenly Anya was in the wrong as soon as he was over her, right? Like, he also just kind of threw her away when he was done. So like he and like he's a character type that this show actually never really gets to do because it's so obsessed with like its Lovecraftian mechanics. He's like an old school devil, right? Like he is like a Mephistopheles, like getting you to sign a deal and ruining you through your own actions, right? Like that's kind of what his pleasure is. But because that is what he is, it makes such a great bounce off. Like it as much as this is Xander at his most right, it shows how destructive he has been to Anya's life just by being in this like weird, codependent, anxious attachment relationship.
And so then we go to Buffy. We get to Xander and Anya in the frat house. Buffy arrives, and she really, I mean, Anthony, you've said this numerous times, but she really arrives as the villain. Like, she's cold-faced. She's not saying anything. She's just there to fucking kill Anya. Like, and there's no, they don't pretend otherwise, right? Like, even Anya says, like, where's your banter? And like, Buffy still doesn't say anything. She's just hacking at her.
What's
like,
great is that even in that beat, she points out what a bully Buffy has been to her. Like, where's your pop culture references I don't get, right? Like, it's bad both ways.
It's really it's like a fight that is also deeply personal, like Anya taking out what I think she sees as an active effort on Buffy's part to alienate her for years, always keeping her as the outcast, right? Like in that moment when she says the pop culture reference, she's saying like, where's the thing that always reminds me that I'm not in your group? Like, here you are trying to kill me.
Which we learned in this episode has been her experience for 1,300 years, right? Like, she's like, take your literal interpretations to the other side of the river, is what people told her. She was odd.
And her line where Buffy and Xander show up and Anya says, "I should have slaughtered people weeks ago."
So good.
This is what it takes for them to pay attention to her, right? This is what it takes for them to want to engage with her.
So good.
So sad,
and then we get the Anya gets stabbed, which I feel like is a silly beat because we already saw Halfrek get stabbed and we know that does nothing, but it does create good visuals, and we get the flashback to
also horrible. Like, it's really both when she gets stabbed and when she pulls it out, it is really visceral.
Yeah, I think the pull out, which phrasing, but like the pull out is what I think really does it for me, because it's like the like grossness of, and like her acting of like, it still hurts. Like, she still feels it. It's not like she's not feeling the pain, just didn't kill her. So like, I don't know. I do really like that. But so then we get our final flashback of our Anya episode is her kind of wearing a WandaVision wig, the same wig that she wears in that show. And
maybe she got to keep it.
Maybe, right?
It's like a Nicole Kidman situation. They're all in the closet waiting.
I made a note about that wig because I feel like it's such a terrible wig. It's so dusty, and two, it's a terrible approximation of what Anya's hair looked like in Once More with Feeling, because her hair was not that big. Like, that hair has its volume and dust, and that's not what the hair looks like.
Volume and dust. I mean, yeah, but so I often go back and forth whether I feel like this was necessary, but I do. I think, like, because I was wondering on this viewing what I would feel, because sometimes I feel like the other flashbacks did more character work, and this is kind of revisiting character. Like, this isn't new character work, right? This is her within the last season, so we've already seen this version of Anya, but I do think it works because the Anya we end up with is different. So this time it was like, ugh, this hurts my feelings. I love Anya too much. Like, she's so happy, and we know that he's gonna leave her at the fucking altar after this, and like she puts on her wedding dress, and
well, this is my favorite flashback, not just because I love the song, but also I feel like, I mean, this is an episode all about what Anya has chosen to identify herself as, and in the Russia flashback, she says, I am vengeance, and then this is I will be Mrs. So it's really about the transition from like vengeance to attachment to a man, and I really, that's kind of why I love this little interlude, if you will. It's my favorite flashback just because I love the song, and I think it's
really
a question of like, what did Anya do when no one was looking? Because we very rarely got that. The camera very rarely looked at Anya when she wasn't had anyone else's eyes on her. So I enjoyed that sense of it, in that, like, oh, when Anya's alone, she thinks about Xander, and that's why we are where we are. She is without self. Like, when she's alone, she sings a song about Xander, and she, as opposed to Buffy, who gets to sing a song about herself.
Right. Yeah. Kiersten, I feel like you were about to say something about the song. I don't know. I think I interrupted you.
Oh, no, I mean, really the same thing, just that, again, she's found a new way to define herself, and it's through a relationship, which isn't her, right? She's going to be Mrs., and I love the Mrs. Anya lame ass made up name Harris. And it just is so good and so sad, because I know so many women like that, and it makes me really sad. Few of us have turned to becoming demons as a response to that, but some have, and I support them in that.
It's really cool that it sounds so fun. Like, it sounds like a pretty song, and like the red flags in it just keep going up, right? It sounds really cute and pretty, but it's like, oh, and if we fight, I'm just gonna shut up and rub his feet, right? Like, it has,
and she's cleaning up his crap the entire song. She's putting away his stuff.
I mean, he literally becomes the thing she orbits around, right? In the scene. Like, it's really great. And like, obviously the horror of the smash cut at the end, right? When she hits that note, it's like a really great, I think it's such a cool inclusion. Also, like, it's a lot of work. Like, writing a song is no joke. Like, putting it in there is really a nice, there's a lot of like overpaying in this episode, which I really like.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, Anthony, because they do so much more than they do in like any regular episode of Buffy. Like, this feels like a very special episode, right? Like, they're going all out.
It's a lot of like the dress comes down. That dress is no joke. Or like the man on fire in the back of the Russia sequence, right? Like, there's a lot of money spent in the margins, which I find really cute.
So yeah, as she goes out to the balcony to sing more in her wedding dress, we cut as she's hitting the note to her stabbed. She has to pull the sword out, and I think it's a really good moment. Like, it's so good and so like weirdly upsetting, because you're just like, fuck, give her a break. Like, let her have a happy relationship. Let her have a good fucking day at least. Like, Jesus. And I feel like I often, as the three of you know, I often say that with Buffy sometimes when they're like having these terrible, like, in season 5 when there's that arc and it's just like nonstop of like them having terrible days. I'm like, can't they just have a nice day? That's how I feel very Anya in this episode. I'm like, I just want her to have a nice day. I want her to have a nice time. But so we learn that Willow did have her talk with Hoffren. Hoffren shows up, and he says that he had the talk with Willow. I wanted to know what all of you thought. There's something that always bothered me. I mean, I know I talked about the soul part, but also leaving this episode after I watched it the first time, since he does nothing to her, and there's no like, even like whatever bad special effects they had to go whatever, I assumed that she still had her powers. He just took her out of like his, like a mobster is like, you're not in my mob anymore. You can do whatever the fuck you want. Like that's how I always took it. But like she doesn't have any powers after this, and she's no longer a demon, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's out.
Yeah, because she's only a demon because of him, right? He's the one who extends the vengeance demon powers.
All right.
Yeah, she serves at his pleasure, right? Like that's the idea is like, and that's why it seems like the point is the insult of it, right? Like she has made nothing in his eyes, and that's why I find the like assassin demons, although they serve a certain plot function in later episodes, it's like that's not the point. The point is that like it almost says it undoes what he's saying here.
Yeah.
Like you're worthless. You're not even worth me killing is what he's ended on here. And then to have him like change his mind is such a weakening of this final scene.
Because we really could have had like any reason for her to have to move into their house, right? It could have been, oh, there's more demons in town. They're attacking Anya. She doesn't have her powers. Boom. There you go. Like just have her move in the house and kill that. But again, D'Hoffryn is really good in this scene because he goes through all of his D'Hoffryn-ness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we see the threatening, we see the jokey, we see like he says, oh, of course the Slayer's trying to stab you. Isn't that just like a Slayer? Like I love that. I love the idea of him like mocking, not even just like he doesn't give a shit about Buffy, right? Like he's not. It's almost like Glory, where like Buffy is just an annoyance to her. That's kind of what she is to D'Hoffryn. She's not the main character of this plot to him at all. Like she's inconsequential, and I like that. And I like that he knows. He's like, oh, that's Xander. This is why you liked him. Oh, like I don't know.
He's gallant. Oh, he's gallant. So good. I like that again, like we talked about how he's a misogynist and like a monster and like a serial killer and whatever, but I love the foil aspect of it, that he's the one. We don't even see the scene with Willow, right? Like he just walked in, he's like, has anyone thought to ask her what she wants? Like that's such a great skewering of the whole problem, right? Like no one is at all interested in what she wants. And so I like that he cuts to the quick of the whole problem, even though it's really fun. Like we kind of blow over the fact that if this escalated, Xander and Buffy are about to come to blows, right? Like that's what he interrupts.
Yeah.
Well, but also you have to look at the fact that Buffy did stab her, right? Knowing that it wouldn't kill her, she stabs her, and then they wait for her to come to. So like there is a certain element of, Buffy's there to kill her, but she's also just like straight up hurting her.
Right. Like if in Buffy's black and white world where Anya has to die, like just cut off her head then, right? Don't like continually stab her with a sword where it's not going to kill her, but it will hurt her a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I also like that D'Hoffryn, he, as he's like talking to them about like, you haven't asked Anya, and like Anya's meek, like, I want to take it back. Like she says it so quietly and so defeated. Emma Caulfield is so good, and I'm so glad she's in WandaVision.
Yeah. We
get the end. She takes it back. He has her repeat it, and then he goes for the kill of bringing in her best friend. If I recall correctly, I think Kali Roja told us she cried when she watched that scene, didn't she, Anthony?
Oh, I don't remember, but
I think she said. I remember her talking about being really upset because she liked playing Halfrek.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way to go, right? Like she's staring at Anya with like love in her eyes. Like it really is. It's actually a better death than Anya gets, right? Like
100%.
It's very moving and very upsetting because it's timed so perfectly that we figure out what's going to happen a second before it happens, right?
Yeah.
So good.
And like she's all smiles. She's just like you said, Anthony. She's looking at Anya with love. Like she's just like, oh, my best friend's here. Cool. Like. Boy.
And I mean, and like I said before, I think it's really a look into D'Hoffryn's mind to be able to so quickly get rid of to get rid of both your your family and your worker, you know, like, I mean,
Right.
if you think of him as the mob boss, it's maybe family and both. But then if you think of him as like the head of the CEO of the vengeance company, it's like you're losing one of your best workers. Well, two really, because he loses Anya and loses Hallie. And it is just so cold.
Well, the nice thing about it is, like, I mean, obviously he doesn't make, there's no, like, we keep, obviously the show is inviting like capitalist, etc. comparisons, but like his business is misery, right? Like that's actually what he wants.
To Paramore.
I was just about to say.
What? Oh,
well, Misery Business is their their first single.
Oh, I'm sure he would love it.
Well, yeah, no, and it's just actually cut out what I just said. I'm not going to say
anything. Okay. Yeah. So then we get Buffy's like, I'll go check on. Buffy doesn't even offer anything up to Anya. Buffy's like, we're done with this. I'm checking to make sure those like frat boys are good, and then I'm leaving. Xander walks out with Anya. I understand the ending. I don't know. I felt like Anya, and clearly I get that it's on purpose. I mean, you guys said she goes a different path than Xander. I just felt like I wanted her to get a break, right? And she doesn't get one. Like, this is very much her being like, I'm going on my own, but I'm just like, fuck, she just had such a miserable episode. And I just wish Anya got, I don't know a different way to have ended this episode, but I do like their talk. I think they're both doing some great acting here. He says, don't be a dope. And she says, I'm a dope. And I'm like, ugh.
Well, I think her, if we're talking about the steps kind of in the human condition and the last one being death, I do think that there is something really beautiful and philosophic when she says, what if I'm really nobody? Because isn't that the question that we all struggle with? Like, we all want to do things to not be nobody, right? Like, we want to write something that has our byline on it. We want to have a podcast that we host. Like, we all do things so that we can put our head down on our pillow and not feel like we're nobody. And so, like, when Anya loses her friend and her career and is human and doesn't have Xander, like, her question is like, what if I'm nobody? And that is just like, I don't know, the human condition. Am I nobody?
I think there's something really audacious about taking a character who is not at the center of your show and asking that question, right? Like, there is something very risky as creators of something to be like, well, what if this character is underdefined? And what's amazing about this episode and what I really like about it is when she says, what if I'm nobody? By the time we're done this episode, we kind of have to agree with Xander that's a silly question, right? Like, even though she has behaved in this pattern that's sort of a tad, like you said, she's like tofu, where she'll take on the flavor of whatever she's near. I think Andrew uses that metaphor about mushrooms, right? At one point where he's like, his evilness is a function of being a mushroom. But like, by the end of this episode, we're like, but she's the most fascinating character because of it, right? Like, she is the coolest person on the board because she doesn't know who she is.
Oh, totally. And I mean, the fucked up thing about her in season 7 is that the last really interesting thing that she asks is, what if I'm nobody? Because then afterwards, the writers are like, well, you're not going to be anybody for the rest of the season. You are going to be nobody, and you're just going to be sarcasm incarnate.
I was going to say, I mean, she does say it out loud later on in the season when she's like, I had much needed sarcasm, but like, that is kind of.
But I will say, actually, I will almost reverse what I said and say she is the person in the I always forget the name of the episode, the one right before Touched, who says to Buffy, you're not luckier than any of us. You're not better than any of us. You're just luckier than us. And I think that's one of the most ballsy things anyone has ever said to Buffy in Buffy's entire life.
I would agree with that. But yeah, so we've come to the end. Before we give our rankings,
I just want to say one more thing about this episode.
Oh yeah,
I think it is very sad that the great kind of thing of this, or like the thing that this episode hinges on, is bringing frat boys back to life. I wish they had chosen someone who deserved life more than frat boys.
It is making really neat. Like, it is making sure, like, we never see them, right? Like, we never. what it never risks is that we want to bring them back, right? Like,
Right.
they're kind of a moral. I mean, again, like Drew Goddard and The Good Place, right? Like these sort of ethical considerations are a thing. There's so many people who could have been the victims here, and I do think it goes out of its way to be like, actually, they're just kind of shitheads, right? Like they
Yeah.
tortured this girl, and we have nothing. We learn nothing redeeming about them. When the Hoffman looks in the other room, he's like, it's like someone killed an Abercrombie and Fitch catalog, right? Like there's nothing redeeming about them. I like that, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably on purpose because we don't even see their body. Like we don't even see aside from like that pan.
It's like a stage play. Like they're always looking off stage at the body.
But all right, so now that we've gotten to the end, now Buffy season 7 costume designer Matt Van Dyne with a breakdown of the outfits from Selfless.
Well, hey everybody. Hi Ian.
Hi Matt. Glad to have you back.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be back. Well, here's what I can tell you about Selfless.
Okay.
On this particular episode, I was involved with part of it, but not all of it. And the reason is I was actually on an Alaskan cruise. And I had booked this cruise like, several months before I took off or began working at Buffy, but I was there for some of the prep of it, but not a lot of the shooting of it. So what I can tell you, and stirring my memory from watching it, is that most of the wardrobe for that particular episode, because I guess, looking at my notes going backwards, I guess it really was because I was out of town, that we used a lot of the wardrobe that we had bought in stock for to build closets. Excuse me, more than stock. It was to build closets when the season began. We started building everybody's closets, so we had extra clothes. And since I wasn't around to sign off on everything that was being purchased that week, we just went back to what we already had in our closets, which was considerable. There were obviously, lots of new items seen in that episode. But when I look at the purchases for that episode, that's why I went back to my my notes, my records, and I thought, well, there really aren't many purchases for episode 5, and now I know why. It's because that was the reason I was out of town. But I do remember this about the opening with the Olaf and the trolls.
Yeah.
That of course that was all rentals. A lot of things from the rental houses, and I do remember. This will give me an opportunity to mention one of our other costumers who would work as a swing person. She would come in every so often if we were doing second unit or something else, in the field. But she was working that week, and I remember she amassed all of those rentals for that scene. And her name is Nadine Reale, and she was a tremendous help to us. And she would come in every so often on different episodes. She didn't really want to have a full-time gig at that time, so it worked out well for all of us. But I remember there was something when I came back from my trip, and I remember, I guess she was sent out to rent, certain items, and she came back with like something that she thought was like the item she was supposed to get. And what she came back with was this like abundance of what they're called breast pads or breastplates.
Okay.
And I remember the big joke when I came back was they had a picture of her holding all of these, and the caption above said, "I rented breastplates." so I remember that was very funny about that. But as far as the purchases for that particular episode, though, what I did see was for Halfrek, the black dress that was purchased for her. I saw that came from Bloomingdale's, and it was made by Laundry, the clothing line Laundry, and it cost all of $180.
Okay.
And then there was a green wrap dress, and I'm trying to rack my brain if that was in that episode. I'm not sure, but we also bought her a green wrap Dion von Furstenberg dress, which was a little more expensive. It was around $300. But most of the items for that show, what I looked at, what was spent was building, rather than building the principal costumes, we were buying things like undergear for an intimate apparel and things like that for the girls and whatnot. Because when you work on a show like this, and when we were doing that episode and being outdoors and here and there, and if it was getting late in the afternoon, it gets chilly, and we had to buy principal for the principal players, we would buy just stock coats for them to wear, just to keep them warm, things like that. So, but for that episode, that's mostly what I remember about it. And of course, there is a lot of fashion in it, as far as a lot of changes for the characters and whatnot. But
I gotta ask you, was Anya the dress she wears when she's in
I
like
wonder.
the Flash?
I know what you're going to ask me. The print. I called it the house dress, basically. I don't see that in my records, so I believe that was rented. I believe.
Okay.
And I do. I do have a memory though of having to dig up the wedding dress. I remember that.
Okay, so it was the same one.
Yes.
Okay.
As I recall, that dress was in a box somewhere.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's what I recall about that.
That's interesting.
And I do remember I had something to do with that. And as far as there was I had another note. Oh, the St. Petersburg scene, with when I was looking up, this is what's funny. When I was looking up the players, and there was the girl on the floor who couldn't breathe, I guess supposed to be dead. Mm-hmm. Her name, she was in the yellow gown. And her name is Sophie Laporte. I just read that. And she went on to work on the show Battlestar Galactica, which is interesting. It's just such a small world, because Terry Dresbach, who was the costume designer prior to me on Buffy, ended up marrying the producer, Ron Moore, of Battlestar Galactica. So it's just like this little world. But I do have in my collection just like a set costume shot, a continuity shot of her laying on the floor covered in blood. I do have that. And I have another continuity shot of the two sitting at the table, Anya and the girl who played Halfrek. Yeah. So, I have a shot of that too. But I'm wondering, in my notes, I saw something about me contacting Angels of London, which is a costume rental house, and I was contacting them, emailing them a photo. Now I'm wondering, in hindsight, if I was matching something or trying to match something, and they something may have come from there, or maybe we rented something from there. I don't have the rental records, but that would tell me. But I have a feeling maybe we were renting some wardrobe from them, probably, and they would ship it to us. So
were Anya and Halfrek's dresses rentals as well? The like St. Petersburg's?
Yes. That's, and I'm wondering if they didn't come from there. They might have. They very well might have.
Because that would take forever to build one of those kind of dresses, right?
Oh yeah, that would be and be way too probably expensive to do it. So I have a hunch they may have come from London, actually. So
they look great in them. So
didn't they? I know the jewelry. That's Terry too. Terry did the jewelry, I'm sure. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it looks great. They look great.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. Well, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye. And now we're going to rate our favorite outfits. Anthony, what was your favorite outfit?
Is it cheating to pick the wedding dress? Because
no,
it is kind of a special effect in and of itself, right? Like that reveal of it. It is a really beautiful 2002 garment. I like it. I think I picked the wedding dress or De Hoffman's weird monk cloak because I really want one, especially in quarantine. It's like a cardigan that is also a robe. It looks great.
Kiersten, what is your favorite outfit?
I mean, I'm genuinely into Willow's red shirt, brown skirt, red tights. And I will always envy a calf-high boot because I cannot wear them. So
why can't you wear a calf-high boot?
Because I'm 4'11" and I have really muscular calves.
Oh,
so yeah,
all right,
yeah. It'd be like if an 11-year-old boy had really muscular calves. Couldn't wear a calf-high boot.
I never know how to feel about jewelry outside the like garment. Like she's got the necklace entirely outside. It's like a very chunky piece.
Yeah, I'm not into the necklace.
Kiersten's like, I didn't mention the necklace for a reason.
Yes. I left the necklace out. I have been known to wear very brightly colored tights that match my dresses until my then 7-year-old daughter was like, Mom, what are you wearing? And I was like, well, I just want to look nice. And she's like, well, it's pretty weird. So then I stopped.
Girls can use whatever weapon they want and they can wear whatever tights they want.
Mathew, what's your favorite outfit?
You know, I'm going to go for a really dumb answer and say that it is like the little hoodie number that Anya is wearing when she fights Buffy, because I always think about like all the characters are kind of what are in what they were wearing that day, but it feels like Anya got dressed to go fight to the death with Buffy and she was like, I want to be comfortable.
Yeah, it was a depression hoodie for sure.
She has a lot of depression garments in this episode. Like her confrontation with Willow in her apartment is also like loungewear, like very quarantine chic.
Well, it's very COVID.
Yeah. Very good.
Lord. So my favorite outfit, I gotta go with Anya's Russian Revolution dress. I love the blood, white gloves, and she looks great. I made that action figure. I made that action figure for this cover because I'm unhinged. But my close second, again, twinsies with Kiersten, is that Willow outfit. I think it's ridiculous, and I like it because it's ridiculous. Favorite scene, Mathew?
I think that this episode only works because of the conflict fight scene. And that is the scene that makes or breaks this episode. So I'm going to say that with a caveat that I'll Be Misses is one of my favorite Buffy moments of all time, but that this episode needs the conflict scene. So I'm going to say the fight.
You mean the fight in the living room?
Oh, the fight in the living room, just between Buffy, Xander, and Willow.
Kiersten?
So not a specific scene, but I think my favorite part of this episode are the cuts. So where you have Anya happy and then you have Anya impaled on the wall. You have Anya happy and then you have Anya washing blood off of her hands. Like I feel like the contrast that they were able to do with those cuts were so jarring and so well done that I think like the cutscenes as a whole probably were my favorite part of the episode. They're so effective.
All right, cool. Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's cheating, but I feel the same way. It's like it really is such a beautiful little piece. Like it really is. I really admire the way this thing is put together. Like every scene, as I said, it's sort of over expending energy in every scene. Like every scene turns in a way that's completely unexpected. So it is hard for me to pick a favorite. I do think the I'll Be Misses moment, only because it is the emotional climax, might be my favorite. That's but not even that song. It's the smash cut, right? Like from an I'll Be that is never completed. It really is beautiful. So I guess that's my favorite, but it really is like this episode has so many of my favorite Buffy scenes in it in one little box.
Yeah.
So I feel the same way Mathew does. Like that Summer's fight scene, like for me, that's like the like you can't have the episode without that scene, but I love all of the flashbacks too. So it's like I feel weird saying in the Anya episode where like Emma Caulfield's doing great work and Anya's written so well that like my favorite scene is one of the few scenes without her. But I think it is that scene with their fight because it's just so important and has been a long time coming. And we see Buffy in the wrong being kind of like stern general, which we will see, for the rest of the season. Yeah. So grade, Kiersten, what grade do you give this episode?
I mean, it's so hard because a lot of this episode makes me really angry, right? Like, I don't like Buffy in this episode. I don't like her choices. I don't agree with them narratively. But at the same time, I do have really strong feelings about this episode, and it doesn't make me angry because it's bad.
Right.
It makes me angry because it's good, and obviously, like, I love Anya. She's my favorite side character. So yeah, I give it an A. I think it's one of the best episodes of Buffy.
Anthony?
Yeah. It is weird because to me, it is not. A lot of the pieces aren't really Buffy episodes. Like, even tonally, I don't know. It is really an Anya episode in a way that it doesn't fit into the mythology in any way, but it really is an A+ for me. Like, it really is one of my favorite. I feel like every time I watch this episode, I feel like I'm opening like a box of chocolates, and like every scene is going to be different, and every scene is so interesting. And it's just like such a breath of fresh air in this season. A+.
Yeah. Oh. Mathew?
Yeah, this is A+ Buffy for me. I do agree with Anthony in that. In a way, it's an aberration from other Buffy episodes, but it is really tight, well done storytelling, and a kind of a character study that the show has not done. There's no other really characters who get their own episodes. Tara gets family, but that is not a Tara episode as much as this is an Anya episode.
Right.
And so
it reminds me of the Zeppo in some ways.
Yeah.
The way that change also like is not really a Buffy episode, right? Like, it's as though the character shapes the tone of the episode.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's nice to see. And I think that what I love about this episode is that so many of the big questions that Buffy wrestles with are kind of all there. So if you wanted to know what the themes of Buffy were, even though this is different from all other Buffy episodes, I do think they're all here because Buffy does talk about what it means to be a Slayer, and Buffy does act alone. And so there's a lot of the sense of, and I mean, this is all about Anya's humanity. So I think that a lot of the main theses of the show are kind of oddly hanging out in this little episode 5 of season 7 and getting either brought up or answered or quandaried in interesting ways that, don't happen just one episode later in Him, which is such a throwaway piece of shit episode.
I like him.
I do too.
I do not like him. So I'm always like so fascinated that this episode is just so good so early on, and so it's A+.
All right. And I give it an A+ as well. I think it does all of the right things. It makes us feel things. It makes us mad at characters we love. Yeah, I think A+. Thank you all for joining us. Mathew, it was so nice to have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. If you like Slayerfest98, you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and other places you get your podcasts. If you want to follow us on social media, we are at SlayerFestX98. You can subscribe to our Patreon, which helps keep the podcast going. You get access to mini episodes and our Facebook group. And if you want to follow me on social, I am at Ian Carlos. Mathew, where can everyone find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Mathew Rodriguez. That's Mathew with 1 T and Rodriguez with a G and a Z. And
Kiersten, where can everyone find you?
So I'm on Twitter at Kiersten White. I'm also on the shelves of your local bookstore with my Buffyverse spin-off books, Slayer and Chosen.
And Anthony?
I am Mia Koopa on Twitter, MEAKOOPA.
All right, guys, we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.